Hi, this is Luke.
And this is Tobin from Quest Research.
Hey, Tobin, what do you get when four guys with absolutely no video experience whatsoever decide to produce their own online paranormal TV show?
I don't know. What? Oh, wait. I do know. Ghost Diaries, right?
That's right.
You can check us out and get involved at www.questresearch.net. And the good thing about being new is that we will only get better.
What are we made of? Why do I get sick? How can I live a more balanced and whole life? These are just a few of the questions explored each week by naturopath, medical intuitive, and clairvoyant Dr. Rita Louise on Just Energy Radio. Explore your possibilities every Friday evening from 7 to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Join us at justenergyradio.com.
Demon Hunter show is rocking its way on the supernatural scene.
It's drive time paranormal broadcasting without the driving or the timing. Just go to www.ghostanddemon.com.
Think you know what goes bump in the night? You ain't heard nothing yet.
Each week we'll be bringing you the best and the worst kept secrets in the paranormal community.
Yeah, us, the Ghostman and Demon Hunter, Sunday from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Ghostanddemon.com. The Ghostman and Demon Hunter show is beyond the normal broadcast.
Hear about this, Doug.
All right. In 1995, 40-year-old Paul Michelson makes a long overdue appointment seeking help from psychiatrist Dr. Morris Bornstein. He tells the doctor he's been harboring a terrible secret for most of his life. At age 13, while playing with a Ouija board, he seemed to make contact with an entity who claimed to be the biblical sorcerer Simon Simon, I think I said Simon Magnus earlier.
Oh,
probably
did you say Magnus?
Because it's, Magnus Apollo.
Well, you can fix it now.
We'll fix it. But anyway, instructed by the entity how to perform a secret ceremony, he believed that he became possessed by the spirit. But did he? Was he really possessed by a spirit, or was he suffering from a serious mental illness? That is what he hopes the doctor can tell him. His life as a living Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde has been a living hell.
Ooh.
In the book, author Samuel Spulman explores the facts of this bizarre real-life case and the story behind the story. For Paul believes the entity which has inhabited his body came from the family's previous home, the one they moved away from when he was only 4. The website is shadowofsimonmagus.multiply.com, and that, of course, is linked up at ghostlytalk.com and will be permanently.
Totally.
We'd like to welcome Samuel Spulman to the show. Welcome.
Hi, Samuel.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, guys.
Yeah, it's good to have you. And when I was going through things and I come across this story, I just found it so interesting, and hence the reason you're here. Now, the story.
You haven't heard anything yet.
well, this
that's
is
only the tip of the iceberg.
This is very, very good timing because they just had out at the movies, for example.
Right.
They had out a based on the true story thing, the Connecticut haunting in Connecticut, right?
Yeah,
and of course, a few years ago they had the remake of the Amityville Horror, which was based on a true story,
and was terrible, also, by the way.
I saw it pretty.
And so here too is another story, based on a true story. Tell us, is it true?
Yeah. Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. It's actually a fictionalized version of a true story. And I'd say about 90% of the story happened the way you'll read it in the book. In the same way the Amityville Horror or the Entity were fictionalized versions of their stories. So why not 100%, right?
Was it long hours sitting up at night? I mean, that's how ghost hunting is. So it might
you have to remember, this story starts in 1941 and it doesn't end until 1995. So everything that happened, you'd have to have a forklift to pick up the book. So you have to make cuts to condense it down. So some characters I had to eliminate for legal reasons, and others I had to create. But the actual supernatural events that happen in the book happen exactly the way you read them. It's just his day-to-day life that had to work around.
This is interesting. But how did you hear about this? How did you hear about this story? And
I know this person, and so I heard it right from the horse's mouth.
Wow!
Now, right off the bat, his real name was not Paul Michelson. He wanted his real name kept anonymous.
And I don't blame him.
I can't blame him much.
After what happened to
in the Amityville Horror, the Leopards came forward, and they had to defend themselves the rest of their life. They called them frauds, they called them liars.
Yes, exactly. And after what happened to that, I certainly don't blame him. But we can call him Paul for.
We'll call him Paul.
Why not?
Yeah, Paul worked.
Samuel called him Paul, so let's call him Paul.
I think that's good. We can call him Theodore. No. He did that last half hour.
Well, let's talk about the story.
I don't know. I think he suffered enough. I'm calling that.
Let's talk about the story. I mean, if you can.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, sure. I'll
it.
try to give you a brief synopsis.
Please. Cool.
Paul was born in 1955 in Louisville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
He and his family lived in this old house that's set way back in the woods until he was 4 years old. They had lived there for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then they moved into the suburbs. But he grew up listening to his mother and the other people tell him stories about this haunted place.
Mm-hmm.
This place was so haunted. You think I'm exaggerating when I tell you this? But their house on Macaulay Road made the Amityville house seem like a bed and breakfast.
Wow.
I mean, it was bad. So anyway, he grows up hearing these stories, and because of that, it piques his interest in the paranormal at an early age. So he reads everything he can find on it. He's kind of a bookworm type.
Mm-hmm.
He spends most of his time in his basement at home. That was sort of his little sanctuary. And as he grows up, he tries to do some ESP experiments. He begins trying to read the backs of playing cards and that sort of thing. He never really has any success at it, but it is fun.
Mm.
So he was doing that.
Well, that
later,
was done a lot of people did that kind of stuff.
Oh, sure.
Back then, it was
in vogue, yeah.
Yeah, it was what people talked about because, there wasn't the internet. It wasn't a fast-paced society.
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly.
plus, he had even more incentive growing up.
Oh, yeah,
around
because
this stuff.
because when your mother tells you she sees a ghost, then you tend to believe the ghosts are real.
Right.
Wow. Anyway, so a little later, he gets a little older, and he becomes an amateur magician. He becomes interested in sleight of hand and card tricks and that sort of thing. And then when he gets to be 13 years old, he decides to take a whack at spiritualism, and he buys a Ouija board.
Okay.
Now, if you've ever played with the Ouija board, you know that when two people put their hands on it, they can get the planchette to move.
Right.
But, when only one person does it, you can't get it to move.
Right.
So he always read that the Ouija board works by tapping into your own subconscious mind, which is pretty interesting by itself. So it's just a game to him. So he puts his hands on the planchette, and he decides he'll push it, but he won't control it. He'll use it like a pen in the automatic writing experiments and just let it slide around and see if he gets any answers.
That's actually a really neat idea. Because
that is what happens to him.
Well, no. But I mean, with that
I don't want to
line,
encourage anybody to try that.
You're right, but with that line of thinking, that's a really neat idea because they do say that it's more internal than external, and if it is, which may or may not be true, but if it is internal, then it would be similar to automatic writing in that you don't have to invite anybody to communicate. You could just say, I want to know more about myself and work that way. But
that was his mindset.
Yeah, so he went in with that mindset, and I can see where that logically makes a lot of sense.
Well, one day...
this is where it all falls apart, huh?
yeah, one day he seems to make contact with an entity that calls itself Simon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember, he's not taking any of this seriously, but he's kind of amazed at the details that his subconscious is coming up with this story. Simon claims to be the biblical sorcerer Simon Magus.
Right.
And he begins to tell him his life story. So every day, Paul comes home from school. He goes down to his basement. He gets out his Ouija board, and he starts talking to his imaginary friend Simon. And he gets little by little, he gets his whole life story, and he's writing it down. And he's just astonished by all the detail that his imagination is coming up with. That things he can't figure out where they're coming from. So that kind of kept him interested in. I'll give you a little capsule version of Simon's life. I can't tell you the whole thing because we're pressed for time.
Right.
But Simon claimed that he was born in the year 13 B.C., that his father was a Roman soldier named Antonius, and his mother was a Jewish prostitute named Rachel. That because he was born with blue eyes, which was a dead giveaway to his Roman blood,
right.
And since the penalty in those days for a woman sleeping with a Roman soldier was death by stoning, she decided to sell the baby into slavery. So she sells it to a wealthy Alexandrian merchant. At the age of 7, he runs away and becomes a child of the streets. And at age 13, he gets caught stealing in a religious temple by the chief priest, whose name was Tanaim. Well, Tanaim sort of makes him a slave, but he's really more like his son. He kind of takes a liking to the boy. So he stays there for the next 10 years, and he begins to learn the secrets not only of ceremonial magic, but also the illusions which the Egyptians also created. You know, when you see magicians like Chris Angel and those guys on TV,
right?
Most of those illusions had their basis way back in ancient Egypt.
Wow.
Now, not because the Egyptian priests didn't believe in magic; they believed wholeheartedly in their gods and the ceremonial magic. But real magic takes a lot of prayer and fasting and time, and people wanted instant miracles, so they created these illusions.
You know, the book is 90% true because it's really an epic if you were to write it as a historical book, right? So about 90% true, but all of the supernatural stuff is true. Well, you know what? I think we maybe we just experienced yet something else that Simon is a little trickster.
I know you'll think I'm off my top, but you can't believe the trouble I've had in getting this thing even published, because unlike like I said, unlike Dracula or other fictional monsters, Simon's real,
right?
And he really doesn't want this story told. So what we're going to have to do right now is the white light ritual.
Okay.
And that's to protect you guys, and that's his only defense and only weakness.
I'll
explain
do the
why later.
Ritual.
Now, I'm going to have to use the word Lord if that offends some people. You can substitute universe. It works just as well.
You can say whatever you want on here. It's open
okay.
Completely open.
Lord, send down your white light upon us. Protect us from all evil, all darkness, and all things that dwell in darkness. Now, everyone picture a brilliant white light shining down on them from above. If you have trouble visualizing that, you might try picturing standing in a field of snow with the sunlight shining down on you. Once you do that, you're safe. And I'll explain why before the hour's up, assuming everything doesn't cut out of me. Okay, where were we? Simon was telling Paul his story on the Ouija board.
Yes.
Paul's writing it down every day. And while that's happening, strange things start happening at his house. The first thing, now remember that what you don't know is Paul's father is away all week on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And he only comes home on weekends. So the only ones living in the house is him and his mother. The first thing that happened was that everyone started hearing walking sounds in the hallway at night, in the middle of the night, and no one was there. Paul explained that to his father. His father dismissed it. Oh, it's probably just, the house settling. Because he didn't hear it.
I hear that
just
so
like,
much. He's only home on the weekends. He,
right.
It doesn't.
He wasn't there, right?
Right.
So anyway, the next thing that happened is he started hearing scratching sounds behind the wall that his bed touched in his room.
That's interesting. That is very, very similar. The build-up like this that you're describing so far is very similar to the Bell Witch story build-up.
That's funny you should mention that.
Yeah, which terrorized the town. Yeah, that terrorized the town like what, one state south of there. So
that's exactly right. Oh, it's a very haunted area.
Yeah.
At any rate, so he hears the scratching sounds. He tells his mother. She thinks it's maybe mice. They set traps. They never actually catch any mice. The next thing that happens is he hears breathing sounds in his room one night. I mean, big, open mouth kind of breathing sounds. He holds his breath. He still hears it. He's terrified. This is in the middle of the night. Okay, the next morning, he tells his mother about it. And remember, she lived in a haunted house for 18 years. So she thinks, so she believes in ghosts. And she thinks, well, maybe something has followed us over here.
Mm-hmm.
So, being Roman Catholic, she gets out of a bottle of holy water and she goes and sprinkles everybody's bed at night. And Paul gets out of the bathroom and goes into his room after she did that. And his pillow has swollen up in the center like someone put a head of cabbage in the middle of it. This is a foam rubber pillow.
Ooh.
So, so they take it out of the carport and taking a pair of scissors, they cut it open. And inside the lump, it looks like someone had stuck the foam rubber in a meat grinder. There was just no explanation for it. So because of that, now Paul begins to realize that all this weird stuff began right about the same time as he started doing his little Ouija board game downstairs. So he's beginning to wonder if maybe there really is something to this. So he goes to school in the library and he starts trying to look up some of the facts that he got off of the Ouija board. And he runs across a book on biblical figures. And one of the things he reads is that Simon's parents were named Antonius and Rachel.
Oh.
He nearly
yeah, that had to absolutely scare him to the core.
Yeah.
Because he's like,
now,
up until now
he totally believes, well, I must really be in contact with the biblical Simon Magus. So he goes home and gets out his Ouija board, and he starts talking to Simon, and he says, do you know anything about this weird stuff that's going on in my house? And Simon says, yes. And he tells him that because they were communicating in this manner, that they've cracked open the door to the astral world, and these other undesirable entities are coming through and causing all that problem. He tells Paul there's only two ways to stop it. They can either break off their communication, or he could show Paul a way to bring him across to his side of the veil. So he offers to teach Paul this special spell of invocation, and they would forever merge their two spirits.
Ah, God, it sounds like Star Trek or something. What's going on here?
yeah, and they would share the same body. And then he even offers to be Paul's teacher of magic. Well, as a 13-year-old amateur magician with dreams of being the greatest magician the world has ever known, Paul didn't bat an eyelid. he was not only convinced this was Simon, he really wanted to do this. So he practiced the spell. It took him a couple weeks. And then one night he sneaks out of his bed and he goes down to the basement at midnight and he performs the spell of invocation. And when it's over, nothing happens. And he thinks, well, this is silly. She's feeling kind of dumb at this point. So anyway, he takes the Ouija board out and he tries to contact Simon and he gets no reply. So he just goes on with his life. He goes on to school. And a couple days later, he's sitting in class. And it gets hard to focus. It's like reality is at the end of a tunnel that's moving away. It's like he can't concentrate. He feels almost detached from his body, I guess would be the best way to describe it. Now, all at once, boom, it's like he blacked out and instantly woke up, and now he's no longer in class. He's standing in front of his locker. And it was like instantaneous for him. And he looks at his watch, and 2 hours have passed.
Ooh,
he has no idea what happened to him for 2 hours. So he's kind of freaking, right? But his mother is so overprotective. He thought about going home and telling her what happened, but he said, oh, she's going to rush me straight to the hospital. And they're going to put all these, he doesn't want to go through that. So he thinks, he'll try to figure it out on his own. Again, he tries to contact Simon, no reply. So he goes on to school. Again, he's sitting in class. This time, something different happens. All of a sudden, it's like he no longer has any control over his body. It's like he's watching from inside his own body, which is moving around by itself. Now, most of us can imagine sleepwalking, your body moving around by itself. But what if you woke up in the middle of it and you still had no control and your body was just moving around on its own? So you can imagine how terrifying that would be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he experienced. But it only lasted for a few seconds. Still, that was enough to shake him up. Now he's beginning to get suspicious that maybe the spell of invocation wasn't just a big joke after all. So he goes home. His mother happens to go to the store right after he gets home. So he's alone in the house. He goes down to his basement. He gets out the Ouija board. Simon still won't contact him. And he's upset. He's really upset. So he starts talking to Simon out loud. And he's like, I didn't know it was going to be like this. I want out. I want you out of my body. Let's forget this whole thing. And if you won't leave, then I'm going to have to tell my parents everything. Well, the minute he says that, Simon instantly takes over his body. Boom. And he can watch what's going on. He's mentally alert, but his body is walking around and talking and moving on its own. And Simon is no longer Mr. Nice Guy. not the one that he was talking to on the board that was so friendly and wise. And now all of a sudden he's vicious and demanding. And he tells Paul that he must never tell anyone about him. And if he does, that person will die. And it will be Paul's hand on the knife.
Wow, this is going to be terrifying.
It's horrible. And he's only 13.
Yeah.
So and then he sees his own head look over. And he has a dog chain that hangs from a rafter. That's on 2 hooks. It's like a loop, a chain. And Simon pushes a chair under it and stands in the chair and tells Paul this is the only way that you could ever get out. Sticks his head in the loop of chain and steps off the chair. And the minute Paul's toes hit the concrete, the chain slams into his neck. And he falls to the floor. It's the worst pain he's ever felt in his life. And he can move now, and he's just in tears. He doesn't know what to do. But he can't tell anybody because he's afraid of what Simon will do to him.
Right.
So he tries to just go upstairs and forget about it, and get on with his life. He decides that, if Helen Keller, was blind and deaf and goes on to become a teacher, that maybe he can just live with this handicap,
Right.
Because he really doesn't have any choice.
So far, the Simon entity didn't seem to do much. He scared him. He made him phase out for a couple hours and then just a few moments, and it didn't seem all that.
It's not that bad. Okay.
Yeah,
in fact, it gets better because as it turns out, Simon seems to only come out once a month. I know it's cliche, but it's around the time of the full moon.
Okay.
I never did know why. Perhaps it was ritualistic. But at any rate, he'd come out in class. He would pick out somebody, usually a female, who's sitting in front of him, and he would stare at him for 15 minutes or so, and then Paul would be back in control. And Paul couldn't figure out what the heck is he doing? It didn't make any sense.
Right.
So, which I'm going to tell you a little later what's going on.
Like, why not invent some weird application of ancient science knowledge that would allow him to take over the world, or something nefarious. Instead, he's just staring at these.
What is he up to?
Yeah.
Well, Paul begins to grow, and now all the weird phenomenon that was going on during the Ouija board experiment continued. None of it stopped after the spell of invocation, like he was told. The walking sounds continued. In fact, it began to spread. Everybody Paul came in contact with began to experience weird paranormal activity, and they would tell him about it because they knew he was into it. It happened to his best friend at school. He would hear the walking sounds to his house. Another person would feel invisible hands touching them, and somebody would hear their voice being whispered to them. People would hear the breathing sounds. But the most common thing is people would see, either they would dream it or they would see it for real, a dark, hooded figure with glowing eyes in their room at night.
Ooh.
Now, this is the same way Simon would appear to Paul in his dreams. Simon kept coming to Paul in his dreams after that, and that's how they communicated. And he would look like a hooded figure with glowing eyes. In fact, the cover of the book, and everybody who has the website can go there and see the cover. The cover of the book is actually a drawing by the real Paul Michelson of the Simon entity.
We actually have that on our site too, in our guest section. I put that up also, and Doug, I'm going to show it to you also right now. And if you go to our photo section, guys out there, and go to our guest section, where we have our guests at. Yeah, this I pulled this photo from there, and so it's right there. That's what. And if you're listening to this show in archive format, whatever it is right now, you can go to our guest section in our photo book, and you'll be able to see this too. It's a really weird-looking photo. Yeah.
Well, as Paul begins to grow, he begins to doubt himself. He begins to think, maybe I'm just crazy. That's what anybody would think. You saw the movie Three Faces of Eve about the lady that has a multiple personality. You think, maybe that's what's going on with me. Maybe I'm not really possessed. Maybe I'm just nuts. And I think that's pretty much what we would all begin to think, or want to think.
Yeah.
Again, everybody around him began to experience paranormal activity. Then things began to get worse because everybody that he's close to begins to grow sick and die.
I know people like that in my life. They just make me sick. They're probably possessed also. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, in 1 year, his mother dies of cancer, his best friend dies of cancer, his dog dies of cancer, his father gets sick and hospitalized. He starts taking care of him. It just doesn't seem to end. And all those people had seen the dark figure and had felt something sitting on their chest and the other things that were going on with this weird story.
Yeah.
So, Paul grows up. He gets married to his high school sweetheart, she also saw the dark entity. She called him up one night in hysterics. This is when they were dating.
Yeah.
And she was hysterical. Finally, he got her to calm down enough. She said she sleeps in her bedroom, and just as she turned out the light, she felt like she was being watched, and you've all had that feeling.
Yeah.
And she rolls over, and her heart nearly stopped because standing in the doorway was this tall, dark figure with a hood and glowing eyes.
Ooh.
Well, she screamed so loud, she said she practically woke the neighborhood. And then when she screamed, her eyes go closed, and when she opened them, it wasn't there. And she called him up hysterical. This happened 2 nights in a row. Then after he marries her, even on their honeymoon, she hears the breathing sounds. She wakes him up. Do you hear that noise? He's like, no, that's just that clock that makes that noise. Don't worry about it. He blows it off, so she won't be frightened. But he knows what it is. So 6 months into the marriage, she gets sick. She's never been sick a day in her life. She develops this lung disease that even the doctors can't figure out what it is. Paul's father dies, and they move to Florida so that maybe the winters won't be so bad on her because she has a lung problem now. And his problem continues. Simon continues to take over his body monthly. And after he grows up, Simon's behavior becomes a lot worse than just staring at people. He's very similar to Mr. Hyde. He's kind of he goes out and picks up prostitutes. He seems obsessed with sex, and he goes out and picks up these women and leaves Paul holding the bag. He can't. He had to lie and
Paul has to pay
cover up
for it
and
cover up for it. Get in trouble for it.
Yeah.
What a gig that
what's
is,
he supposed to say? Because you got to go home and say, "Gee, honey, it wasn't me. It was the 2,000-year-old wizard that lives in my body." Okay,
Amber,
buy it.
Let me ask my girlfriend right now. Would that work on you, Amber?
What?
If I went out and had just piles of disgusting sex with multiple women and did lines of coke and just went nuts, and just drank a bunch of hard alcohol, and then I came home, you're like, what that? I come home with my hair all over the place, like my shirt ripped
completely
off,
broke,
lipstick all over me.
Out the bank account.
Yeah, just totally ripped out of my mind. I go, honey, you know what? I'm really sorry.
It's the 2,000-year-old wizard.
I was possessed.
No.
That doesn't work.
No.
All right.
Yeah.
I just had to ask her that for verification.
So Paul did have quite a problem.
Yeah, he had a real problem.
Yeah,
obviously.
his life is horrible. He loses job after job because of Simon. He can't explain his behavior to people. He can't tell anybody about it. It's just awful. Okay, well, since we're a little short on time because of our technical difficulty.
Yeah, no problem. That's why we went through the break. We were supposed to take a break at 7:30, but we went through that because we know we get short some time. Sorry about that.
I'll jump to the chase and let you know what was happening. When Paul's 41 years old in 1996, he discovers, but he never gives up hope. He keeps reading book after book. Magic got him into this. He thinks maybe magic can get him out. He wants to find a way to expel this thing from his body. So he keeps reading and reading and reading. And he comes across a book called Vampires, The Occult Truth by Constantinos.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever had him as a guest?
No.
Well, you should.
I don't think he would want us, because he wrote a book.
Oh, boy, this is
very good, but
yeah,
it's a long story.
But I am familiar with the book. I have read the book.
I've heard he's a
I've
great
read
guy.
several things by Constantine.
And everybody I've talked to said he's a great guy.
He did Vampires, The Occult Truth. He did the how to talk to the dead.
How to speak to the dead.
I read that voraciously.
Well, in the book, Paul discovers a chapter called Intentional Psychic Vampires.
I remember that chapter.
Yes. Now, what that is it's a special type of ghost that siphons the life force from the living to maintain their own astral body. What normally happens when you die is your astral body is released from your physical body. Inside your astral body is your soul, consciousness, mental body, whatever you want to call it. And without the chemical processes of the physical body to generate new life force, energy, the astral body will begin to break up 24 to 48 hours after you die. Then the mental body is free to move on into the light, and you go, to your judgment or whatever happens after that. But a lot of people are afraid of going into the light because of the lives they've led. So nothing personal. But anyway.
Well, yeah. If you go out and do that kind of stuff, you better be afraid to go in the light.
Well, yeah.
Right. So they found a way to cheat. What they do is they siphon the life force from the living and to maintain their own astral body, and that way they can stay earthbound. These, according to Constantinos, 1 out of 4 people will be attacked by an entity of this type, even though it's little well known, in their lifetime. The old hang attacks in Canada and the North, those are a type of psychic vampire. She comes in and she terrorizes the individual. They usually feel like they're fighting with it. That's where the adrenaline will get pumping.
Mm-hmm.
And they always feel like something's sitting on their chest.
Yeah.
And they can't breathe. And that's actually her siphoning the life force from their heart chakra. But they can take the life force from any chakra. Now here's I'm going to solve a mystery that a lot of people don't know about. The entity, the famous one, was, in fact, a psychic vampire. The reason he would slap her around and rape her was to increase her own terror, so her heart would beat faster and her adrenaline would pump faster, and she would produce a lot more life force energy, which he would withdraw through the root chakra.
Samuel, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask you, were you listening to the last half hour before we had you on the show?
No, I wasn't. No, I was sitting here waiting by the phone.
Because we were talking about the entity. With
we were talking about the entity. I mean,
it was a brief conversation, but it's just funny you mentioned that.
Yeah. And poor Carlotta Moran never knew what it was that was attacking her. She didn't get any real help from the team that came to investigate, other than verification that she was in fact not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But if she'd only known about the white light ritual, and that's why I did that a while ago. The only thing these entities are afraid of is the white light, because that's the reason they're psychic vampires in the first place, is they didn't want to go into the white light, you see, because that will break up their astral body. Because it's a higher form of energy. So, if you perform the white light ritual every night, or especially when you're being attacked, you will drive them off instantly. And it's so simple. It's just like vampires in the movies. Once you know what you're fighting, they're actually very easy to ward off. Except in the movies, it's crosses and stakes and garlic and all that. In real life, it's the white light ritual. It works.
Okay.
All right. So once he found out what about, because when he read that book, it was like the answer to a 40-year-old mystery. He finally knew what Simon was and why he was staring at the girls in the class. He was siphoning. They can actually do it by staring.
Mm-hmm.
He was siphoning life force from them. Why everybody got sick around him and started to die?
Because he was draining them.
Because he was draining the life. Yeah, any acupuncturist will tell you that all physical illness in the body begins as a depletion of life force energy.
Yeah.
So as he's depleting the people around Paul, they're getting sick and dying.
And then he's out causing a ruckus because that's increasing
energy,
and
he can actually, once he has a physical body to work with, he can when people have sex, their root chakras are connected. Okay, without getting graphic.
Let's not draw the picture.
No, you got the picture.
Yeah.
So he can actually draw energy from people through that method.
Wow. And it's very active,
And you're talking that's from other partners,
right? So if you go out and woo, you're.
And I'm not trying to prolong this conversation. I just wanted to ask that. I was interested in
connecting with a lot of energy there.
So okay, all right, I understand.
All right. So Paul was eventually able to free himself. It took like 7 years. He began to study the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is like a spiritual exercise course, if you will, and it helps your spirit to grow. So he was sort of stunted at 13 when this thing took over his body, and so by practicing the Kabbalah, he was able to have his spirit grow to the point where he was able to meet Simon on equal terms, man to man, and was able to resist having him take over his body. Now, Paul probably would think all this was in his head, except for the fact that other people would experience Simon, and there was always the photographs. Now, Simon seemed to show up in photographs. He would either be a dark form or he'd be an ectoplasmic mist, and you would actually see a hooded, white-bearded man in a lot of these photographs. I have them on my website, and I have them labeled Ghostly Talk for anybody who wants to check those out.
Wow.
I have the actual photograph, and then I have a retouched photograph, so you can jump back and forth and see where I'm actually seeing the hooded figure. And there's one you probably won't need. Paul likes to perform at the Renaissance Festival, and he's sitting there in costume on this bench. And standing behind him to his left, you will see a hooded, white, bearded man that's transparent, and it's as plain as day.
Wow.
Okay? So, unless people can take pictures of hallucinations, I think that the jury's going to have to give him a bill of health here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and these pictures are up on your website, you said, right?
They're on the website. There's like 7 of them. There were a lot more than that. There was a house fire in '88. It burned up a lot of the photos, but these are good enough.
There's a couple of things, Samuel, that just really frighten me. Obviously, the story itself is extremely frightening, and Paul went through, hell on earth, right? But but also the fact that this kind of thing could happen. It did happen to somebody who just lived in Louisville, Kentucky, right?
That's right.
Why couldn't it happen to somebody in Des Moines, Iowa, or Detroit, Michigan?
Absolutely.
Or, or I don't know, Santa Fe,
one of the things I wanted to get across with this book is to teach young people to please not experiment with Ouija boards, because despite what Parker Brothers says, it's not a game.
Right.
You can get into some serious. This guy ruined his whole life because of this one little game.
Yeah, he went into.
It could happen to anybody.
Wow, and without he was obviously trying to do some really cool stuff and things like that, and he got fooled. Yeah, right. I mean, he went in. He said, "Oh, I could do this wonderful stuff. I'd have a teacher, and then nope. And instead, he lived a life of torture."
Well, we often hear about the Ouija board thing, and we've heard one story after another from people on and off the air where they say, and it starts with, so we started playing with this Ouija board, and one of the number one warning signs I hear from people, and I'm not here to knock Ouija boards.
There are a lot of stories that start out that way.
Well, there's a lot of debates out there, and it seems like this story is one of the same too, because people say that these entities that could come through the Ouija board, they pose themselves as, hey, what's going on? What's happening, dude? It's cool. We'll hook you up.
They're the lower level entities that are tricksters and liars.
And they act cool, and then as soon as they get control, then like Simon did in this case, he just started raising hell, and he was demanding, and he was aggressive, and he was mean, right? After he turned over.
Yeah,
sure. They always start out friendly.
Right, because you can't
until it's too late.
Yeah, if you growl at someone, they're probably not going to come back and say, hey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, while Paul was growing up, he secretly tape recorded his mother and other people telling the stories of tales of Macaulay Road, that house they lived in, and he later transcribed them into a book. And I have that book right in front of me.
Wow.
And if you'd like to hear one or two of these, because they're very short.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. This is Paul asking. His mother's name was Katie. Now, I have to edit it a little bit because Katie was she was a Kentucky farm girl. She tended to curse like a sailor with Tourette's syndrome.
Yes, we are on actual radio, so it's probably a good idea not to do that.
I didn't know that earlier tonight, so no more.
I'll give you the G version.
Okay.
G rated. Paul says, what was the first unusual thing that happened back there? And Katie says, well, we moved there in March 1941, and this next thing I'm going to tell you happened in May. It was time to plant flowers, and I was out digging all around the house. Well, the more I dug, the more horrible the ground looked. It had a greenish-black color to it, and it was hard as a rock. Daddy was going to help me spade it up, and I turned to him and I said, this dang ground wouldn't grow nothing. It was bare all the way around the house, but weeds as tall as the house everywhere else. Well, one day, it was raining outside, and after it quit, I went out, and there was the funniest-looking stuff bubbling up in my flower bed that I've ever seen. So I told Daddy, I said, I don't know what in the world's in my flower bed. Somebody must have poured something in it. Go out and take a look. Well, he came back in, and he wouldn't say anything. He knew what it was, but he didn't want to scare me because he knew I was already scared of that place as it was. He waited about a week before he told me. I kept raising Cain about somebody pouring something in my flower bed. So finally he said, well, child, I don't want to scare you, but that's blood all the way around this house.
Oh.
And I said, I know dang well I'm leaving here now. Well, what do you mean? What kind of blood? He said, I don't know. I guess it's where the Indians had their battles is the only thing I can tell you. I had a Hebrew brother, he said it was a hog farm or something. It was about 5 or 6 feet wide, and it went all the way around the house. And when the sun would shine on it, it would be greenish-brown color. And when it rained, it would bubble up a reddish-brown color. You could wipe it up with your hand. I tried everything to get rid of it. I'd dig and turn the dirt over, but it was still there. Then I tried to pile dirt over it, but it still come on through. I finally ended up planting some bushes around the house, so I wouldn't have to look at it.
Sounds like the taste of Mez kind of. They tried rubbing those things out over and over, and they just kept coming up.
And it just keeps coming and coming and coming. Ooh.
Yeah. Oh, that's just the beginning. Believe me. Anyway, all of Macaulay Rose stories are in this book, and they're not unrelated. 2 stories actually tie in. What actually happened was the entity that Paul contacted. What happened when they moved, they took some of their furniture and they put it in the basement. And the actual kitchen table from Macaulay Road was the table that he was using to do the Ouija board experiment.
Oh, my gosh.
So they actually brought something with them. And all the Macaulay Road stories are in the book. And those alone are worth the price of the book, believe me.
Did he ever find out the identity of the actual entity, or was it just
all he knows for sure is that it was a psychic vampire.
Right.
Was it really the biblical sorcerer, Simon Magus? Nobody knows. There's no way to know. Mm-hmm. A lot of the facts that he pulled out of the Ouija board turned out to be true, and he had no knowledge of them. Mm-hmm. Plus, there was one other little problem. This is from Macaulay Road also. Yeah. Paul says, according to my notes, the next thing that happened was when you saw that strange man. And Katie says, yeah, he was coming down the hall in a long robe and beard. He was coming right toward my door. I was awake and looking at it. And I raised up, and he turned and went down the steps. He was wearing a purple-looking robe, and he had a turban on and a beard. And when I saw it, I thought it was somebody. When I got to the steps, I didn't see anybody, and I didn't hear anybody walking. So I knew it was a ghost or something. So his mother saw a man dressed in Middle Eastern garb in Macaulay Road about 10 years before he was born. Now, is it a coincidence that they were both haunted by this Middle Eastern character? What was he doing there in Kentucky? There's no way to know that. Mm-hmm. Of course, if he was a psychic vampire, they are naturally attracted to any place where there's a lot of psychic energy. And this place is just a vortex of psychic energy.
Yeah. This is absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. And you collected these stories by talking with Paul, or
Paul wrote them transcribed them into a book.
Oh, okay. So he was recording
for
them
himself. Yeah, he recorded them and transcribed them into the book. The tapes burned up in 1988, but the book didn't. And he gave me the book, and I got it right here.
Does he not want anything to do with this after this, or does he?
He just doesn't want to be hounded by the press. You know, like Carlotta Moran, she kept her identity a secret, so all she had to deal with the rest of her life was the entity.
Right.
Not the entity and the press, you know.
Because out of the two,
I think I'd rather deal with the entity, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. At least you know what you got. With the press, they could do anything. Is he happy?
Oh yeah, his life's finally normal. Again, you know, after all this time, he got remarried, and he's living a normal life now. After all this time, no more dreams with Simon in them. No more weird photographs. No more everybody feeling hands on them and having paranormal experiences. It's over finally.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is awesome.
At least it had a happy ending.
Yes, but it took a lot of work from him, a lot of terror. And
he was
work. 7 years.
He didn't completely free himself of the thing till like 2002. So it took a long time, even after he found out what it was, and a lot of work to get rid of it.
Do you think there may be, and this is just, talking off the top of my head on this, but he said he's freed himself of this. Do you think, it seems like with something like that, you'd never be free. You'd have the memory still. You couldn't get rid of those things. It seems like you'd be mentally scarred from something like that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's true. He tries to live the life. He's a little worried about the book coming out because he's afraid that people will recognize him in the book. And who wants this to get out?
Well, yeah, I agree.
He's suffered enough. He doesn't want reporters sticking microphones in his face.
Well, I imagine after an experience, an ordeal like that, I mean, really, you just want to be left alone. That's how I feel, and I never even had to deal with that.
Right.
I don't want to talk to people now, and I've never been possessed. So I can only imagine the pain he's going through. To be honest with you, but no, it's a very interesting story, and that's I'm so glad we were able to bring you on and talk to you about this and have you tell us this story because.
Oh, I'm so glad you had me on.
Yeah,
so glad you had, and I don't think the little power outage you had was an accident, honestly.
I'm beginning not to think so either.
Well, I don't know.
It is the first time in literally years.
See, back in the
day,
day, Samuel, we used to, with the old studio and stuff, we used to have one problem after another, and we put a lot of time, and I got to knock on wood the whole time I'm talking here. I'm going to be hitting the table
and picturing yourself enveloped in white
exactly
light.
Because
just do the white light before we start every show.
We've been very lucky here. The last 3 years, 4 years almost, I think, we haven't had barely just little things here and there that we could fix on the fly during the show.
Right.
Nothing brought down our broadcast ever, in a real long time.
Until today.
Until
your segment.
Yes. Thanks, Samuel. Jeez, man, you broke our show. How does that feel?
Well, thank you for having me on.
No problem.
And, listen, I know the economy's bad these days and people can't buy as many books as they want to, but if you only can buy one paranormal book this year, this is the one you want to get.
Cool. It sure is. It sounds like it's got...
It's not like anything you've ever read before, and I only skimmed the surface of it.
It's got snippets of... It's got just this phenomenal story of this,
And you can check out the photos for free. And they're linked up to your site.
Right, and it's got the snippets from the road, the stuff that Paul wrote, recorded during, while it was happening and while he was asking the actual principles. So it's not like, my friend's grandmother's, daughter.
Yeah, I got it right from the horse's mouth.
This is right from the...
I actually experienced part of it, but we won't go into that.
What a fantastic... The book is called The Shadow of Simon Magus, and the website is shadowofsimonmagus.multiply.com, and of course there is a link right on ghostlytalk.com.
Yeah, we'll have that link up here.
The book's on Amazon.com.
Oh yeah, you can go to Amazon and get it.
Hang on the line for 1 second, Samuel. Don't leave us just yet, okay?
Oh, hang in there.
Thank you.
Hang in for 1 sec.
Coming up, we're going to be talking to Gene Lafferty, a friend of the show, a real good friend of the show. As a matter of fact, a plaque that he gave us last year is hanging on the wall here in the studio. Yeah. So we're really excited to talk to him, and we're going to be talking to him about, I don't even want to we're not going to try the word, because you didn't do it at the beginning of the show.
I didn't do it. The word is presbyscuses or something.
It's a flower. We're going to be talking about flowers.
Yes. I have no idea.
Hang on the line for 1 second, guys. We'll be right back. This is Ghost and I'm Scott L.
And I'm Doug.
We'll be back here in a few minutes.
Miss a live broadcast? Feel free to download it direct from the on-demand archives at ghostlytalk.com.